The time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot and whether pigs have wings. Okay, it's that time where I finally break down Disneyland Paris. This is my notebook. I have a lot of notes. I don't want this to be too long-winded. I'm gonna see how I do here. I have so many thoughts. There's good, bad, just plain strange things that happen there. I think what I'll do is I'll just break it down the way I did my notes, which was just some random first thoughts, and then I'll go into rides and things like that. Okay. To start with, my first thing that's really, I guess these were things that just seem really different there, was the security was the first thing that really was very, very different over there. And remember, I'm coming at this from the perspective of as an American who frequents the U.S. parks, definitely very well acquainted with Walt Disney World. I've been to Disneyland as well, but this was my first time going to any of the international parks. And it's not that I wasn't prepared, because I watched loads of videos over the last few years, just prepping myself about what's different over there, what things did I want to make sure I did over there, getting excited about going to Disneyland Paris. One thing that I was well aware of was that unlike the Asian parks, so Tokyo, Hong Kong, and Shanghai are owned by a third party, and they do their licensing through Disney. So they use the Disney Imagineers to create these attractions, and they do all the licensing with Disney, but they're actually owned by a different corporation entirely. Whereas Disneyland Paris is still part of the theme parks that Walt Disney World and Disneyland in California are. So I really expected that things would mostly be on par with each other. I knew some things would be different, but I thought that for the most part it would be very similar to the US parks. The first thing that I noticed at Disneyland Paris was the security is much, 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 much tighter than it is at the other Disney parks. And you can look at this as a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, to me, it felt like an annoyance a little bit because it was a lot stricter than I'm used to. It was a lot scarier to me. I guess the point is it's not supposed to be, but here's the thing. I noticed because we took a shuttle bus from the airport to Disneyland Paris, and it drops you off at the resorts just like you would do if you went to like Walt Disney World and you got like a Mir shuttle and got dropped off at your resort. So they're dropping off at these different resorts, and I'm noticing that like the gates to get into the complexes are way more secure complexes. Like I noticed this all over France. There's these little like cylindrical things that come out of the ground. And when we were in a different part of France, we had a guide telling us, if you see these circles on the ground, like watch where you're stepping, because they can go up at any moment. This is to block off the roads. So, yeah, there's like these little cylindrical things that come up and these gates that go across. It's not like when you go to Florida and there's just like, like a gate like you would see at a toll booth or a railroad crossing, just like a single bar going down. Like that's what I'm used to seeing at the US parks. This was like really tight, like locked up security. Like you cannot get in or out of this resort if you wanted to. So in that regard, I'm like, oh, wow, this is really pretty secure. That's kind of a good feeling, I guess. So that was the first thing I noticed. Then we get out of and get our luggage, and we go to enter the resort to check in, and there's a security guard at the front door, and they're like, no, you can't get in. You have to go through this other entrance where there's an x-ray machine, and they have to x-ray your entire luggage before you even get in the door to the resort. And I was like, oh, our bad. We didn't realize that. So we went and waited in line for our luggage to get x-rayed. I guess I'm thinking they already do this at the airport. We should be good. But no, we had to do that. And then you get to check in. And then you drop your luggage off with Bell Services because obviously your room's not going to be ready right away. And then when our room was ready and we came back, I, told Bell Services, I'm like, they're not going to make us x-ray our luggage again, are they? And they were like, oh yeah, you already did that. I'll tell the guard that you're all set. And they went and talked to the guard, and there was a little bit of bickering about it, but they let us through. And there were some people later on that I saw, they made them redo it again. And other people like us, I guess, got lucky enough that they got to go to their room at that point. But it wasn't just the x-ray machine to get into the room. It was every time we went to the park. So just if I had my bag that I was bringing to the park, it had to go through the x-ray machine every time, as well as my shopping bags, whatever I purchased at the parks, they had to go through x-ray before you got to go up to your room. So that was just standard. Every time you came back from the parks, you had to go through this x-ray machine system. And then when you were at the parks themselves, they do the same thing. Your backpack that you're bringing into the park has to go through an x-ray machine before you go in. And then they still have the little towers that you go through yourself to see, if anything you have sets it off. And, at the U.S. parks, you just go through, and if something sets it off, then they do a bag search, and then you're on your way. But this was like just a lot more security just to get in and out of places. And then the biggie for me that like really just made me go OMG was that this is the only Disney park that I have seen armed military personnel at. We're talking military people with military grade rifles walking around on Disney property itself. Like I saw them in Disney Village, I saw them in the parks, to the point that I actually had to Google this and be like, what is going on? And then I found out that there's something in France right now called Operation Sentinel, where they are sending military personnel to like big tourist areas to just, make people feel safer from terrorist activity and things like that. And I guess, I don't know, to the French, maybe that makes them feel safe. To me as an American, seeing people walking around with loaded weapons like that made me feel very scared, very uneasy. I do understand that unlike the other Disney parks I've been to, Disneyland Paris has a train station right outside it. Like you can take the metro right to that stop and get out. So I can understand with a train station right there that it might be a good idea to have some significant security there. But to me, I just felt like very out of myself that here are people carrying military rifles, not just like a shotgun, but like a rifle that could, kill 20 people within seconds. I just was absolutely terrified to see these people walking around the parks. And that might just be a me thing. I mean, like I said, Google said that the Europeans feel much safer having these people in place. I don't know. I just felt really ill at ease about it. And that was my first kind of, wow, we're not in Kansas anymore experiences. All right. As far as the resort itself that we stayed at Sequoia Lodge, which has a Bambi theme to it. Similar to something like, I guess, the Wilderness Lodge at Walt Disney World, kind of, that foresty feeling. Um, we stayed there, I would say we narrowed it down to a few locations. The most value resorts there were themed to Cars and Toy Story, which we don't really love. Then kind of the more moderate resorts there were the Sequoia Lodge and the Newport. And I, Jeremy was really like, we are not staying at a resort in Paris that is themed to New England when we are from New England. That would be like the most ridiculous, stupid thing ever. So we opted to do the Sequoia Lodge. But Sequoia Lodge really is in need of a refurbishment, and they're actually slated to have one in 2026. And definitely it was not the most comfortable lodgings. One of the, I guess, cute, nice things that they do there is they have these environmental features, because it's supposed to be like, save Bambi in the forest and all of that. So they have like, they have all these weird things like that. There's like a game in the shower where it shows how much water you're using. So there's colors that go off in the shower head, like you've used this much water, you've used that much water, And it's not that it stops the water from coming. Like you can still take as long of a shower as you want, but it just makes you feel bad about the fact that you're taking a longer shower. And then the hair dryer was ridiculous. I don't know what they were thinking with that thing, but it hardly would dry your hair at all. And definitely no fridge, no makeup mirror, no basic things that I'm used to having at a basic value resort in the States. So, I would not say that our accommodations were particularly comfortable. But it was, I have written down that it was the thinnest towels I have ever had anywhere at any hotel experience in my life. It was like, Disney, can't you just buy new towels for this place? It was ridiculous. There was a breakfast buffet at the restaurant every day, and that got busy. And it was pretty good. And the resorts are kind of close enough to property that you can either take like a 5-minute shuttle bus over to the parks, or you can do a 20-minute walk. And that walk will take you like through the Disney Village part, whereas the bus will take you kind of to the entrance of the parks. We opted to take the shuttle every single time just because we were going to be doing a lot of walking in the parks. So, that was our preference. Next on my list to talk about is PhotoPass, which I did sign up for because I'm well acquainted with how PhotoPass works here in the US. It's right on the app. This was not. This was sort of more similar to how PhotoPass used to be, where you had a card and it would get scanned when you got photos. But the thing is, I would definitely not invest in PhotoPass again. I think I paid like 90 euros or maybe it was US dollars for it. It was definitely not worth it. The photographers were hard to find. First of all, unlike in the US parks where they wear these lime green shirts, so they're really easy to spot, they were wearing gray shirts, and there was not nearly as many of them. We got 4 pictures in front of the castle, which I thought was kind of ridiculous. We stood in line to get pictures, to get these shots from the castle, and like I said, they only took 4, and they were not the best. And I was like, what? What just happened? I'm used to if you're on Main Street USA getting pictures taken, you usually get like a 10 to 12 pictures of you and your family. I don't know. I've never gotten just 4 before. I thought that was weird. We got a weird magic shot, which again, I was surprised because I think most of the magic shots in the US, you go to them and they take other pictures as well as just the magic shot, but this was just the magic shot. We got our ride photos, and that was it. I think I got maybe 8 photos total the whole time, and they were not great. And I just couldn't believe that the selfies I took in front of the castle were better than the ones that we had photographed of us. So I definitely would not recommend that. The meal plan. I did sign up for the meal plan. They had different options. They are different than they are here in this country, but I wanted to prepay for as much ahead of time as I could. So I did decide to do the meal plan, and I did the half board plan, which was basically a breakfast every morning, and then dinner. So one other meal. So we got like 3 breakfasts, 3 dinners, because that's how many nights we were going to be there. The meal plan was confusing. I did wind up messing up our credits. I didn't understand how it worked. What messed it up was I also signed up for 2 character dining experiences when I booked everything. And I thought I was paying for a meal plan plus these character experiences that were not part of that, because they said, unless you're staying at the Disneyland Hotel, which is the deluxe, resort there, that you would have to pay for the character experiences. And I'm like, that's fine, blah, blah. But I didn't realize that the price they were giving me were just upgrades on top of your meal plan. I thought I was paying for that separately, plus I had my vouchers for the other meals. So I wound up messing things up, which was frustrating. Our last day at the parks, we went to kind of an expensive dinner that I thought would be covered by our credits, and it wasn't. They said, no, you don't have any credits remaining. And I went to guest services afterwards and said, please explain to me what's going on. And they said, oh yeah, you did these upgraded character events. And I'm like, that was an upgrade? I thought that was like the final price tag, because they were so expensive. And I think I've posted to my social medias that, one of them, the Royal Buffet with Mickey and Friends, I do think that was a worthwhile experience. But the breakfast we did with the princesses was truly terrible. And I can't believe that would have been even more expensive out of pocket than what I already thought it was. It just seemed like a complete ripoff. And they, at guest services, they were nice, and they apologized and said, that they would give us a voucher for an upgraded guest experience, like sort of like a fast pass to whatever attraction we wanted to do. And we were like, no, this is our last night, it's fine. We opted not to do that. I will say that the meals there were generally really, really good. The 2 restaurants that we really liked our meals at was our first night there. We went to Bistro Chez Remy, and I had heard some mediocre reviews about that place, but I loved it. I loved my starter, I loved my dinner, I loved my dessert. All of it was really good, and it might be that I was so jet lagged that day that, like, when we finally got to eat dinner that night, it was tremendous. It just made me feel a world better. And it was really cute in there, all decorated like that you're the size of a mouse. I know it's supposed to make you feel like you're, in the movie Ratatouille. It reminded me a lot of the Rescuers Down Under, when like Miss Bianca and Bernard go out to dinner at that restaurant. That's what it felt like to me. It was really cute. I really liked that. And then our last meal of the trip was at Walt's, which is on Main Street USA. And that was great. It's like themed to all of Walt Disney's favorite recipes. And oh man, we had a great meal there. Really, really good. And like I said, we wound up paying out of pocket for it because I didn't budget things correctly, apparently. But I don't regret it. That was a great place. Um, I would say that Disneyland Paris is not really known as much for the iconic snacks the way that the parks in the US are. Uh, Honestly, their bakery was closed while we were down there, so um, it didn't seem like the options I saw for snacks were that exciting. We didn't really invest in as much. I do think that I've noticed that in France, people are really big on Nutella. Man, they love hazelnut like it's going out of style. They're really big on Nutella. They really like pistachio, which I do like that, but it was just weirder that those were sort of the main flavors that you would find down there. So a lot of the snacks didn't look particularly appetizing to me. So yeah, we didn't do as much snacking that way. But the meals we had were quite good. Um, all right, cast members. Here's where things get interesting. I wrote down here that some of them were nice. Many were quite rude. Again, we know that this is a cultural thing, that the Americans find French people rude. Very much cultural differences at play here. But yes, I did think that in general, the French people are not as polite as Americans. And it's weird for someone who has worked in customer service as many years as myself. I didn't think prior to this trip the Americans were particularly polite, but we actually are. Um, for example, when we would get on and off a bus, at US parks, you know that the bus pulls up, you stay behind the yellow line, you wait for people to get off, and then you're allowed on the bus. Here, it is a free-for-all. They don't care where you're standing when the bus pulls up, and people will jump on before people have even gotten off. I was like, what is even happening right now? Why is this happening? There was one night that we had stayed for fireworks, and our bus driver that night just kept yelling in French. We didn't know what he was talking about. Apparently, because it was standing room only by the time we got on, and Jeremy's backpack was just over the line by the door where it was like setting off like the door alarm, and he was trying to tell him to move. So we finally understood what he meant, and then when he stopped at the different resorts, he didn't announce what resort we were at, and of course it's dark out and we don't know. So the first stop, he stopped, opened the door for like less than 10 seconds, and then closed them and kept going. Like nobody got off the bus, and everyone was like, wait, what was that stop? And he just kept yelling at everybody in French. And then I paid attention and saw that the next resort was our resort. So we got off. And I was like, I think some people missed their stop because he didn't announce it. And Jeremy was like, I think so too. It was really weird to see cast members being that rude, especially with Disney being known for like impeccable customer service. That was really odd to me to have experiences like that. Some of the restaurants, the wait staff was pretty unattentive. I had a confusing experience. I went to the Animation Academy to see if I could sign up for a drawing class there, and the cast member and I just couldn't communicate. Like, I didn't know enough French and he didn't know enough English for us to get on the same page. I like went there. It was 2:30 in the afternoon and that class had started, and I asked him if if the 3 o'clock class was full yet. And he said, full, I don't understand. And I said, are there spots still available for the next class? And he had like these pieces of paper, and he's like, I give you paper and you come back at the appointed time. And I said, okay, great. And he's like, next class that he had a paper for was in an hour. I said, okay, so 4 o'clock. And he was like, no, 3 o'clock. And I said, that's the next class at 3 o'clock. And he's like, no, in an hour. And I was like, is it at 3 or is it at 4? And he was like, it's at 3. And I said, okay, so I should just stay here because it's like, 2:35. I'll just stay in line here and wait for the 3 o'clock class. And he's like, no, you have to come back in an hour. And I was like, all right. I said, I'm just too confused right now to know if you want me here at 3 or 4. So I guess I'm just going to forget about it. And I left, and I was like, they're used to like using military time over there. So even if he had just told me in that what he wanted, but I think he was too confused and I was too confused, and it just didn't wind up happening. And I understand that that's just a language barrier thing. I do think the restrooms there were very frustrating. I feel like in the U.S. parks that you don't generally have to wait in line for a restroom. Sometimes you do if it's busy. Say Fantasmic just got out or something. Yeah, I get that everybody needs a restroom at that point. But it just seemed like every restroom all the time. And it didn't matter. There were restaurants we went into that I thought, okay, surely because I am in a restaurant that only the people eating here are at, that there won't be a line for the restroom, and there would still be a line for the restroom. So I just couldn't get over the fact that there were lines constantly for the ladies' room. And I don't know what the problem is. If they just didn't build enough, I guess they didn't do enough stalls. I don't feel like this is a problem down in Florida, even on busy days. I feel like if there's a long line somewhere, you just wait and go to the next restroom and you probably won't have to wait. But here it was like every restroom you had to wait, which was definitely a frustrating experience. And then the other thing was that the custodians would be cleaning the bathrooms while you're in there, and this was an experience I had all over France. I had some really, really bizarre public restroom experience stories, and I could probably make a video just about that. But I did have an experience at Disneyland Paris, and like I said, some other places too, that were weird, and where I was waiting to use a restroom, and then the custodian would start cleaning an open stall and be like, you can't use it, I'm cleaning here. And I'd be like, wait, what? Why are you not waiting for the line to go down and then clean? Like, I feel like that would never fly here in America, that you would never be like, tell someone waiting to use a bathroom, you gotta wait while I clean first. I can't imagine. I was in shock. And yeah, let's not even go there. I just had some weird bathroom experiences. But yes, overall, I just felt like there were these rude experiences happening that I'm just not used to. But it's just because I guess their expectations are just very different than that of Americans. And yeah, even though I had been prepared that was how I was going to perceive cast members, I ran into someone a few weeks before my trip who told me she had been to Disneyland Paris, and she told me, just remember, the cast members there are pretty rude. And I'm like, oh yeah, everyone says that, the French are rude, we'll see. Yeah, and I hate to report that. I really didn't want that to be the experience, but it definitely did not meet my expectations of Disney customer service at all. Disney Village, which is the shopping district, it's much smaller than Disney Springs or even Downtown Disney. It's kind of a hot mess of walls right now. Not a lot of variety within the stores. And we only went there the first day that we were there. We went shopping when we first got there because we were so jet lagged. We had no desire to go on rides when we got there that first day. We were just exhausted. We just wanted to eat food and we wanted to go shopping and then go back to our room and just sleep because we were so out of it. As far as Sleeping Beauty Castle is concerned, yeah, this one's the pretty one. Definitely the prettiest of the castles I have seen, and many people have said of all the ones in the world, the one in Paris is definitely the prettiest Disney castle. The Sleeping Beauty theming was absolutely gorgeous. You can go inside the castle. There's shops inside the castle. There's all these decorations. It kind of tells the story Sleeping Beauty, similar to the one in Anaheim, but, you know, much more detailed. And then when you go underneath, there's the dragon. The dragon was fantastic. Yeah, so let's see. As far as the fireworks are concerned, so we stayed for Tales of Magic one night. Really wanted to go see the nighttime spectacular over there because they're able to do drones with their show, which due to regulations in this country you can't do. So it's, you know, it's supposed to be very exciting to see, and we really wanted to see it. And the following night was possible rain in the forecast, and if it rains, I know they'll still do fireworks, but they won't do the drones, and I wanted to make sure we got to see the drones. So we waited for 2 hours to see Disney Tales of Magic. The one thing that was really shocking and weird to get used to over there is it gets dark very late. Like, the sun doesn't start setting until 10 o'clock at night. So the fireworks show wasn't until 10:40, which just feels so late to do that. The drones were very cool. The projections and the story were great. But the guests were very pushy, and it did feel a little bit like being in a mosh pit, which is super weird to say. I think in the end, the view probably would have been better if we had been further away. I wanted to be right in the hub, right up at the castle, because that's what I really wanted to do. I really wanted to see everything right there. But even though we got there early, there were still people in front of us, and then people put their kids on their shoulders, and then people have their phones up, and it was really hard to see everything the way I wanted to. But that being said, there were some really cute moments, and I did, you know, wind up tearing up during the Lion King sequence because they, you know, they did He Lives in You, and then they had the big Mufasa with the drones in the sky with the stars. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is happening. It was pretty fantastic, but it also was very chaotic, and we waited a long time, and it was a bit of a frustrating experience. And there was one girl who kept trying to get in front of us, and I kept telling her no, and we kept pushing her back, and it was so super annoying. The other weird thing at Disneyland Paris is that there's a whole thing with timing, and things start exactly on time, and if you are early, that is just too bad. There will be no cast member to help you until that exact time. This came into play a few times. We got in line to meet the Mandalorian, and we had no idea where the line was. Basically, the app said he was meeting at 2 o'clock, so we, you know, at like 1:30, we're like, we gotta find where this line is so we can get ready for it. At a Disney park, if it's like, oh, Snow White's meeting in a half hour, there's a line that, with a cast member saying end of line right here, and they will send you through the queue, and you will stand there and know exactly what's going on. But there was no cast member there. There was nothing. We didn't even know where the line started. We could see where the area where he met was, but we didn't know where the line started or anything. So there were a bunch of people in that general vicinity, and we went up and we were like, are you in line to meet Mando? People were like, yeah, we are. Or some other people were like, no, I'm just sitting here eating lunch. I don't know that there's a line for anything. So we finally, like, collectively all decided that we would stand in this line, and then, like, right at 2, the cast member shows up, and then we finally saw, and then let us into the real queuing area, and we were not really lined up correctly, so we all kind of adjusted accordingly to who was there first and blah blah blah, and everyone was pretty polite about that. And we did wind up getting into the line and meeting Mando, and I gotta say, I was a tad disappointed because he didn't have Grogu, and I was really hoping that he would, but you know, that's okay. We did beat Mando. When we went to check in for some of the meals, there would be like no one at the podium. There were 2 experiences where we got there at the opening time and there was nobody there to meet you. The doors to the restaurant were literally locked and there was no one at the outside podium. At one of the meals at the Royal Banquet, it was inside Disneyland Hotel, and I went up and I found a cast member somewhere else and said, where do I check in for this meal? And she was like, oh, you'll check in over at that podium. I said, there's nobody there. And they were like, right, because the restaurant doesn't open until 6 o'clock. And I was like, okay. So then I noticed the whole lobby was all these people like waiting, like, what do we do? So finally, again, like this makeshift line formed at the podium. But instead of like, I don't know, at a US park, I feel like there would have been somebody already getting people checked in so that you would be sat at your table at 6 o'clock. They didn't even like come out and unlock the doors to the restaurant till 6. And then they started dealing with people. And then everybody's checking in at the same time. It was very chaotic. And that happened at the breakfast we went to as well. Doors were locked and everybody had to get in at the same time. We also noticed that, like, when you got to the parks in the morning for rope drop or anything like that, like, the shops would not be open. A lot of the shops were not open to browse at that time, which I think is weird. I feel like in America, we're all about, you know, merchandising and marketing opportunities, and, like, the shops on Main Street are always going to be open, but no, a lot of them were not, and a lot of them closed earlier, too. So if there were, you know, if the park was getting ready to close, they would close earlier too, which I think is weird because I'm used to going to fireworks and then spending time in the shops, shopping, so that we're not all getting to the buses at the same time. It was just bizarre that there were not, like I said, cast members in place for these different things. It just seemed really, really, really odd to me. As far as like comparative attractions are concerned, we did go on Pirates of the Caribbean. It was fun and longer than the one in Walt Disney World. The sequence of events felt off because it just like started with that scene of the pirates in jail looking for the dog to give them the key. It was like a lot of the same scenes, but they were in a totally different sequence. And I still feel like the Disneyland in California does this ride the best. But they did, you know, it was fun because it had more scenes than the one in Florida, but it just didn't, you know, I know that the big wow factor when they put this one in place was that it had a sword fight in it, which I think because animatronics have come so far over the last several years that this didn't, you know, it wasn't the wow factor that I thought it was going to be. It just, I don't know. It just felt a little weird to me, this one. It was fine. But I definitely would say that the one in Anaheim is still the best. We did Hyperspace Mountain, which is basically Space Mountain with the Star Wars overlay to it. And this was way too thrilling for me. We did this on our third morning, which I couldn't have done it before because of all the jet lag I was experiencing. And I definitely am glad we did it on an empty stomach because I felt like I was going to barf on it anyway. The Star Wars overlay is cool, but I did have to close my eyes through most of it to keep from throwing up. And it's definitely more thrilling than the other Space Mountains. There's a loop, there's a corkscrew, there's all sorts of things going on. Again, the one in California is the smoothest. This one was too much for me. And I told Jeremy that I was either going to ride this or Big Thunder, and I wasn't going to do both. And he opted that we were going to do this. As far as Big Thunder Mountain Railroad is concerned, I have heard that the one in Paris is the best of all the ones in the world, but I just opted not to do it because I couldn't, I couldn't with all the jet lag, I couldn't feel up to another thrilling ride. Small World, I loved it. I do think it's better than the one in Walt Disney World. I do still love the one in California the best because it has the movie characters in it. And something about, I guess, hearing the song in French just made it feel less annoying. Just because that song becomes a lot over time. But yeah, I did enjoy that one. Phantom Manor. I was looking forward to doing Phantom Manor, which is their version of the Haunted Mansion. There is some weird storyline about a jilted bride, and I didn't really understand it. There's a catacomb scene that's kind of creepy because we are, over in Europe, and that was kind of cool. But then it instantly turns into this campy Western ghost town because the Phantom Manor is in Frontierland in this park. So yeah, I didn't love it. I still like the one in Walt Disney World the best. And I do have to say that there were a few things that kind of ruined the ride experience for us. I think I have notes about that later though. Okay, teacups, it's pretty much the same everywhere. The Carousel de Lancelot, these were some stunning looking horses. We really enjoyed that. Snow White attraction, it was the old style Scary Adventures version. The California update that they've done is much better, where it has a much happier storyline. Ratatouille, this is the original Ratatouille ride, and I think it's the best. It felt very 3D without needing the 3D glasses on it. We used single rider line, and we still wound up in the same mouse, so it wound up working to our advantage, and we loved it. The Slinky Dog Zigzag Spin. Okay, this is my kind of ride. Slinky Dog Dash is way too exciting for me, and the Zigzag Spin is just like a kiddie ride, and it's a kiddie coaster, so much more tame than Slinky Dog Dash, and I loved it. Okay, Stitch Live. This was way more fun than the Crush one that they do at Epcot because it's Stitch. And it's very fun and silly, but it's definitely too short. I wish we could have spent more time because Stitch was just so unhinged, and it was very funny. We liked that a lot. We saw Mickey and the Magician, which was a half-hour show at the Walt Disney Studios Park. It was very cute and magical. It had great music, a fun storyline, and it's way, way better than Mickey's Friendship Fair, like in Magic Kingdom. I think it's way better. And I heard somebody I watched a video where somebody said, this is so skippable if you don't have kids. Like, no, I think it was a solid show. Like, there were some magical things that happened that I don't know how they pulled it off. And I think it's well worth watching no matter what age you are. And hearing Mickey speaking in French was really cute too. Okay, and then this show I went to by myself. It was Alice and Lorraine de Coir, the Queen of Hearts. Really exciting, energetic show. It had BMX bikers, it had trampolines, it had crazy costumes, it had unhinged songs. It was innovative and not like anything in the US parks. That was a lot of fun. I really loved it. It was basically um, the characters from Alice in Wonderland throwing a party, and like who is going to be the guest of honor at this party. At first we think it's Alice, and then the Queen of Hearts shows up, and then you kind of vote on who you want the party to be for at the end, and I think it has a different ending depending on who you vote for, but our group voted that it was the Queen of Hearts, and she was fantastic. It was just a lot of fun. I liked that show a lot, and it was different. It wasn't, things didn't look like the Disney version of Alice in Wonderland. It was just really, really creative and brand new looking. Okay. Then I just have some other observations. This one I called Bad Parents and Grandparents. And look, this can happen in the US parks as well, and it just needs to stop everywhere. Basically, don't force your sick kid to stay up for fireworks and spread his germs all over the crowd. That's not okay. Don't like it. Next one is, don't force your kid on a ride that they don't want to go on. I mean, I've seen this plenty of times in Walt Disney World as well. But there was a little girl who was screaming and crying while loading onto It's a Small World. And the cast member asked her grandparents to remove her, and they refused. And we could not move until she stopped crying and calmed down, so we all just had to sit there and wait. And this is just wrong for so many reasons. If a cast member asks you to please remove your child from a ride, I think you should do it. For the sake of all the people waiting behind you, please just do it. It's not worth it. And I think they probably had gone on a scarier boat ride earlier that day, and the kid was traumatized, and they kept telling her, this is going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's just dolls dancing and singing. And they're right. You know, it's a very tame ride, but she had trust issues at that point, and they should have just let her decide she didn't want to ride it. And I just don't know why these people force this on their kids. To the boys who are playing with their lightsabers during the stretch room of Phantom Manor, you ruined the ambiance for everybody there. And shame on your parents for not asking you to behave better. And then there were also people taking flash photography photos in Phantom Manor. Again, very annoying. It ruins the effect of the ride. I was really disappointed because I really was looking forward to that ride, and we had a much longer queue. Like, I think the app said it was going to be a half-hour wait and wound up being closer to an hour. And then, like I said, we get to the stretch room and there's kids playing with their lightsabers. I'm like, excuse me, I want to get immersed in the storyline here. What the heck is happening? All right, just an overview on the guests that I saw in Disneyland Paris. Definitely a lot less people in the motorized scooters. We went days without seeing anybody, and we saw a few on our last day there, but the population overall just appears a lot more healthy than Americans. Just a straight up observation. I think the food content in Europe is a lot healthier, a ton less processed than we're used to, and it's a wake-up call for this country. I think just it's ridiculous that our food is the way it is over here, because even with all the smoking they do over there, they are a lot healthier than us. There was the rudeness on the buses that I already mentioned. I think that needs to stop. I noticed that people over there dress a lot more modest than over here. But they would have all these like really pretty details, like ruffles or lace, or just, you know, it wouldn't be low cut or anything, but it would just be really beautiful to look at. And I just thought people dressed really pretty over there, without it looking like slutty, I guess. And look, I get that, especially in Florida, it is hot, and I understand that the athleisure wear trend that we have over here, it makes more sense at a park like in Florida, but really, I just thought it was just charming to see everybody dressing kind of nicely over there. Um, as far as merchandise is concerned, definitely not as many ears for sale over there. They did not have that many options. A lot of the merchandise was like tacky Paris merchandise, like an Eiffel Tower with Mickey next to it, or Stitch. They are very into Stitch over there, um, which is fine. I love Stitch, but I thought it was weird because they had this brand new Hawaii Stitch collection, and it just was weird because all the merchandise had Stitch on it and then said Hawaii on it. And it's like, I'm not going to buy something at Disneyland Paris that says Hawaii on it. It just seemed really kind of odd. So I think that basically sums up the notes that I made that I wanted to review. Of course, I have lots and lots of thoughts. So if there's any topic about Disneyland Paris that you have questions about, feel free to ask. I know my general feeling about it is that I'm glad I went. There were parts of it that were a lot of fun, but I do not feel the need to go back there. I feel like if I want to do Disney, for me, Florida just fits the boxes a lot better. It just, when you're in that Disney bubble, I felt a lot safer in Florida. I feel a lot more at ease. I understand the rules. I feel like I can, people, like I said, are just more polite. The customer service is great. People are bubbly, like Jeremy just felt like the cast members there were just not what we're used to. And I said, well, I just don't think people are as outgoing as they are in America over there anyway. But he was like, but they're Disney cast members. They should be like excited when they talk to you. And I'm like, I don't know. I think our expectations are just different than what they have in Europe. But yeah, overall, it was a fun time, but I'm glad we did it as the first part of our trip. And that was sort of the idea, was that we would be there on our jet lag days to kind of get us acclimated to the time changes and all of that, but that we would be really fresh once we got to the boat and got to our Viking cruise portion of the trip. And I'm glad that we did that. I'm glad that we spent a few days somewhere prior to that, because we were really fresh and ready to roll once we got on the boat. But yeah, that was how we did Disneyland Paris, and just let me know if there's anything you want me to clarify about it. Okay, thank you for watching.